The final rites for Phyllis and her sibling, Tuanna, were organized for the 3rd and 4th of April. 2 siblings over 2 days, a neighborhood forced to mourn twice for lives that were cut far too short. I keep revisiting a post by her friend Verony because the way she closed her Facebook message really stuck with me. That represents sorrow at its most vulnerable. There is no polish or poetic phrasing involved here. It is just someone reaching out to a soul they can no longer touch. Such deep loss is simply impossible to process immediately. You find yourself still speaking to them, asking them to greet lost relatives, because it is the only way to cope. We must also remember 71-year-old Tuanna. She was a complete bystander to the primary conflict. She was just resting inside her own 4 walls, right in her bedroom, when her life ended. Her legacy requires us to speak out just as boldly. She was a human being. She had a whole circle of loved ones, but now she is missing. How is this possible? If you or anyone you know feels trapped in a scary home life, call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-279-927233 or text START-to-8-8788. Operators are standing by all day and night. Heartbreak like this shouldn't be the end of the road. Sleep well, Phyllis. Sleep well, Tuanna. You are cherished, and your legacy will remain intact. If this account impacted you, spread the word. Not for clicks, but because Phyllis and Tuanna are more than their tragedies. They were vibrant individuals with deep roots and many people who deeply valued them. Join 12 AM Crime since these accounts must be shared, and we are sticking around. Post a response below and give us your take. We check every feedback post, truly. And if you watched until the very end, thanks a lot. We will catch you when it hits midnight. A beloved educator who lost her life to gun violence is being honored today by the community and the school where she taught. Lourdes, we're reporting from Raycoan Scholastic Academy, where the mood has been heavy all week since 68-year-old lead teacher Phyllis Goolsby, whose memorial is covered in tributes behind me, was tragically killed last weekend. He gunned down his partner first, then he turned the weapon on her sister. Afterward, he dialed 911 and confessed everything he'd done. He was 75 years old. Tonight, we're focusing on the 2 women he murdered because their legacy is what truly matters here. Honestly, we need to pause and process that for a moment. This individual actually picked up his phone right after the act. He called the cops himself. It wasn't a neighbor reporting gunfire, and it wasn't because someone was pounding on their door. He made the call on his own, admitted to the crimes, and just sat there waiting to be arrested. The sheer nerve of it. Let's dive into this. When midnight hits, the real stories surface. I'm 12 AM Crime, and every day I cover true stories of domestic disputes that turned fatal. These are the cases the authorities tried to ignore and the victims who need their names remembered. If you want the honest, gritty truth, hit that subscribe button. A fresh case drops daily at midnight. Don't let these victims be forgotten. This is 12 AM Crime. Phyllis Goolsby was 68. A dedicated head teacher at Raycoan Scholastic Academy on Chicago's South Side, a place she'd worked at since 2011. She worked with 4-year-olds, little kids who still struggle with their laces, give random hugs, and always forget to wait their turn to speak. Phyllis stayed in the classroom for those children. She planned to retire at 65, but that milestone came and went. Then she pushed it back another year, and another, and then one more after that. She simply couldn't walk away from those kids. She knew it, and they felt that love too. A coworker of over 10 years watched her delay her retirement time and again, always promising she'd finish up soon. Her original plan was to retire at 65. She'd say, "This is my last year." Then she'd change her mind for just one more year. Then again. Then again. She'd tell us, "You know what? I'm just here for the kids. I love them too much to leave." It was a constant cycle. Just a few weeks back, 2 former students, now 8 and 13, stopped by to visit, and she just broke down in tears. She pulled them into a hug. That was her heart. Moving forward, she was far more than an educator. She was a sibling and a friend, the kind of person who prioritized others even when she was dealing with her own life. Her friend Verony Smith shared a Facebook post after Phyllis passed that really captures who she was. She wrote, "Phyllis R. Goolsby. I still laugh thinking about when I was your secret Santa. Ha ha. You knew it was me because I picked out all your favorites. "Man, I love you, and I'm going to miss you. You always looked out for me and never stopped telling me you were proud of my growth. We met during my darkest days, but you stayed by my side to lift me up and help me find my way." That's a ride or die friend right there. The type of woman who finds you at your lowest and refuses to leave. Who shows up every day to remind you of your worth, even when you can't see it yourself. That was Phyllis's spirit. Now, sharing that home on South Poria Street in the Washington Heights neighborhood was her older sister, Tuanna Thomas, who was 71 years old. The sisters lived together on Chicago's South Side in a house they called their own in a familiar community. For 25 years, a quarter of a century, a man named William Wallace Jr. was part of Phyllis's life. He was her long-term partner, her choice, a man who, for decades, was a constant presence in that house and a member of their inner circle. To be clear, 25 years isn't just a casual fling or a short-term thing. That is a man who was deeply embedded in her world for longer than many people have even been alive. Tuanna saw that relationship unfold every single day. She knew him well. He knew her. They'd shared meals and space for 20-plus years. Now, pay attention, because this is where the gravity of the situation really hits home. On the evening of March 7th, 2026, a tragedy unfolded inside that residence on South Poria Street. A fight broke out, a heated conflict. Records indicate Wallace lost his temper and claimed he was just done with them. Two women in their own residence, people he'd been close to for over 2 decades. That word tired is what people always use to try and rationalize how a night like this happens. Let's be real for a second. This man was fed up with them in their own home. We don't have every word spoken. We can't know how much pressure had been mounting behind those doors before that night, but we know the ending. We can only imagine the sheer terror or disorientation that gripped Phyllis and Tuanna during those final moments. Despite the panic, they were right where they should have felt most secure, the family residence. Then, the shouting match turned physical. 75-year-old William Wallace Jr., a senior who surely knew better after 25 years together, grabbed a pistol and pulled the trigger. His first target was Tuanna Thomas. Responders discovered her body in a downstairs sleeping area, hit in the spine and chest. It is insane. To be backstabbed in your private sanctuary by someone you trusted for ages is unthinkable. Next, he climbed the stairs to find Phyllis. She was gunned down in her own upstairs hallway. Spent brass littered the entire residence. Paramedics confirmed neither woman survived the encounter. Afterwards, William Wallace Jr. dialed 911. He flatly confessed his actions to the operator. He even disclosed the firearm's location upstairs near Phyllis. It is just bizarre. Then the sirens faded as police pulled up. Not even 20 minutes had elapsed since the gunfire. Wallace was just standing on the curb. Supposedly, he spilled everything again the moment patrolmen arrived. Recounting the whole tragedy, he pointed out the murder weapon and surrendered quietly, leaving the victims he had known for decades lying cold indoors. This is absolutely nuts. When the Chicago PD hit that South Peoria Street address that Saturday evening, they did not have a whodunit. No one had to kick in any deadbolts. There were no breadcrumbs to follow or witnesses giving conflicting stories. The killer was simply waiting for them. He placed the call himself. He stood by. When they rolled up, he reportedly laid out the entire sequence of events again. Let me tell you this. Usually, detectives grind for weeks or months to figure out the facts, the perp, and the motive. They are digging through cell logs, checking cameras, and dealing with tight-lipped bystanders. That is the standard grind. But here, the suspect handed over a full admission before the tech could even snap on latex gloves. Cops went inside and saw precisely what Wallace mentioned during the emergency call. Tuanna Thomas lay in a ground floor room riddled with bullets. Phyllis Goolsby was upstairs, dead from a chest wound. Casings were everywhere. This was not confined to a single spot. It paints a picture of the absolute bedlam during those last seconds. 2 victims on different levels, and 1 gunman stalking through a house he had visited for years. They found the heater right where Wallace claimed it was just sitting upstairs. No ditching the piece, no cover-up, no lies. The iron that took both lives was exactly where he dropped it, and he gave them the map. Detectives from the 22nd District had Wallace in cuffs by 11:06 that evening. Under 20 minutes separated the sound of gunfire from the moment he was in handcuffs. That is an incredibly fast street-level closure. The difficult phase involving legal battles and community healing, however, was just starting. The coroner's office in Cook County officially released the names of the deceased. 68-year-old Phyllis Goolsby was verified as a long-term occupant of the murder scene. Tuanna Thomas, 71, lived there as well. These sisters shared a home and a tragic fate. Now, one detail really stuck in my craw while researching this. Police are still officially looking for a motive. I realize that sounds odd since the guy called it in and stayed put on the steps. However, in legal terms, a confession is not the whole story. The state needs a comprehensive narrative. They have to dig into the background, the daily friction, the pre-shooting tension, and any history of domestic calls. You see, in these household violence scenarios, the actual shooting is rarely the opening chapter. It is typically the final page of a very long, very hidden volume of misery. We might never truly grasp what those 25 years of partnership actually felt like. The secret power struggles, or what Phyllis and Tuanna suffered through while praying for things to improve. Those truths often die with the people involved. That is exactly why this tragedy is so significant. It is not just about the act, it is about the buildup to that front porch. A prominent and cherished educator who lost her life is being honored today by her local neighborhood and colleagues. Good afternoon, I am Lourdes Duarte alongside Fredina Bear. Let's check in with Jewel Hillary at 79th and Yale. Hey, good afternoon, Lourdes. I am reporting from inside Raycoan Scholastic Academy, where the atmosphere has been incredibly heavy this entire week since 68-year-old faculty leader Phyllis Goolsby. This memorial right here, covered in heartfelt tributes, honors a woman whose life was stolen in a shooting just days ago. Educating little ones was a true calling for Miss Goolsby, a fixture at Raycoan Scholastic Academy since 2011, where she guided preschoolers. Beyond being cherished by her pupils, she shared a bond with her colleagues that felt like actual kinship. This past Saturday, Miss Goolsby and her 71-year-old sibling, Tuanna Thomas, were both gunned down within their Washington Heights residence. 75-year-old William Wallace Jr., her partner of 25 years, now faces dual felony charges for first-degree homicide. Per legal filings, Wallace supposedly confessed to the violent act on several distinct occasions. Raycoan Neighbors, a colleague for over 10 years, describes her as far more than just staff. She was a beloved maternal figure to the whole campus. Her plan was to step away from work at 65. She would often claim, "I am finally retiring." Then she would waffle, "Perhaps next year." Then he would echo, "Maybe next year." It went on like that until she finally decided, "Actually, my heart is with these children. I am staying for them." It became a beautiful, recurring theme in her life. Just 2 weeks back, a pair of former students aged 8 and 13 visited her, moving her to tears of joy. She embraced them warmly. To honor her today, the entire school is dressed in her signature shade of blue. Reports indicate that memorial services for the two sisters are set for April 3rd and 4th. Word is spreading that families she touched are flying into Chicago from every corner of the nation to pay their respects. Bringing you this update from the South Side, I am Jewel Hillary with WGN News. Thanks for that report, Jewel. William Wallace Jr. was hit with 2 first-degree murder counts, one for the loss of Phyllis and another for Tuanna. At 75, he was officially charged after reportedly admitting guilt to 911 dispatchers, responding police, and later informal legal statements. Let that sink in. He owned up to it repeatedly. This was no accidental slip of the tongue fueled by temporary shock. There are several records where William Wallace Jr. explicitly told the authorities that he was the one responsible. During the hearing, the state detailed the sequence of events, the dispute, the gunfire, the phone call, his admission, and the found pistol. To meet the legal threshold for a double first-degree homicide charge, prosecutors must prove deliberate action, that this was no mishap, lapse in judgment, or unintentional discharge. The specifics here are chilling. Consider that the victims were targeted on completely different levels of the resident. Putting the weapon down before calling to narrate the deed suggests a level of calculation that warrants these severe charges. Ultimately, the justice system will move at its own pace through the court. Lawyers will make their arguments. Yet the evidence found in police files paints a remarkably straightforward and grim picture. A guy lost his temper, reached for a firearm, and two innocent women lost everything because of it. That is the dark reality of partner abuse. It rarely makes a loud entrance before things turn tragic. Scars are not always visible to the public. Sometimes the toxicity hides behind closed doors for decades in seemingly ordinary houses. Eventually, a breaking point is reached from which there is simply no coming back. Now, those who cared for them, their coworkers, and the friends who mailed them holiday greetings or celebrated at parties are the ones now struggling to rationalize an act that is completely irrational. Following Phyllis's passing, the students at Raycoan Scholastic Academy all arrived dressed in blue to honor her memory. Toddlers wore blue tops and knits, basically whatever their folks could pull from the closet that day. They entered a school that felt hollow without the presence of the teacher who had been there since 2011. Little kids only show up like that if you truly mattered to them. Children that young do not fake their sadness. They simply feel the loss. Even adults who left the city years ago were arranging trips home for the service. Mothers and fathers who once relied on her guidance were returning from all over to pay their final respects. Tuanna Thomas had no role in the dispute that ended her life. She was a bystander inside her own bedroom. She was killed because she lived there. That is the reach of domestic violence. It does not stop at the primary target. Investigators are still formally establishing motive. A confession covers what happened, not the full history of why. The preceding years of private conflict, power dynamics, and fear are often the story that never gets told in court. Friends described Phyllis as someone who found people at their lowest and refused to leave. She stayed for others in every part of her life. She stayed for her student. She stayed in a relationship that ended with a gun in her hallway. Domestic homicide is rarely the first act of violence. It is almost always the last page of a long and hidden story that only the people inside the house ever knew. A confession tells us what happened in the final 20 minutes. It tells us nothing about the years before, the pattern, the control, the fear, and the moments when someone could have stepped in but did not. Wallace faced 2 counts of first-degree murder. The charges require proof of deliberate action. Prosecutors point to the sequence: dispute, gunfire on 2 separate floors, a phone call, then a calm surrender. That is not an accident. Phyllis and Tuanna Thomas deserve to feel safe in their own home. Memorial services were held on April 3rd and 4th. Families flew in from across the country for 2 sisters who were taken in a single night. If you or someone you know is in a dangerous home situation, call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233 or text START to 88788, available 24 hours a day. Subscribe so these victims are not forgotten. Phyllis Goolsby and Tuanna Thomas were more than how they died. Say their names and share this video. Their story deserves to be heard. He shot his partner. Then he walked upstairs and shot her sister. Then he called 911, told the operator exactly what he had done, and waited on the porch for police to arrive. Phyllis Goolsby was 68 years old, a head teacher at a Chicago preschool who had delayed her retirement 3 times because she loved her students too much to leave. Her older sister, Tuanna Thomas, 71, lived with her in their Southside home. She was asleep in a downstairs bedroom when William Wallace Jr., Phyllis, partner of 25 years, shot her in the spine and chest. He then walked upstairs and shot Phyllis in her hallway. Spent casings were found on multiple floors. 2 women on 2 different levels of the same house in their own home on a Saturday night. Wallace was 75 years old. He had known both women for over 2 decades. He confessed to the 911 dispatcher, confessed again to arriving officers, told them where the gun was, and surrendered quietly. He was in handcuffs within 20 minutes of the gunfire. Police had a full confession before they had finished pulling on latex gloves. There was no mystery about who did it or what happened. What remained unknown was everything that came before. 25 years of shared space. The arguments that neighbors never heard. The tension that Phyllis and Tuanna lived with behind closed doors. A week after her death, every student at Raycoan Scholastic Academy came to school dressed in blue. Toddlers in their favorite blue shirts, chosen by parents who needed their children to know that someone who loved them was gone. Former students, now 8 and 13, had visited Phyllis just 2 weeks before she was killed. She pulled them into a hug and cried. She had stayed in that classroom for children like them for 3 years past her planned retirement.